Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we are going to be addressing the 900 pound, 900 pound, 9,000 pound elephant in the room, and that is the military activity that has once again erupted in the Middle East. It it is a reoccurring event. It seems to happen like clockwork these days. And what what came to my mind when I learned of this latest attack by Israel and the United States on the country of Iran, what came into my mind were the words wars and rumors of wars. These are, of course, taken from the New Testament, from Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapter 24. And somehow it seemed appropriate to respond to the events of the past 24 hours, 72 hours, 36 hours, however long it's been, with an acknowledgement of that particular chapter of the Bible and a bit of a refresher as to what it states and its seeming purpose. So, regardless of any sort of uh, prophetic view as to the outcome of this present conflict and the specifics around this conflict related to Iran and Israel and whatnot, I was hoping that we would at least take this opportunity to reflect on the times that we are living in general, and if we can relate in some way to the specifics that Matthew outlines in chapter 24 of the New Testament. And what, if any, does all this mean for us on the path? What can we divine from these divine words? And what can we incorporate, practically speaking, into our lives and into our practices on a daily basis or on a moment by moment basis in light of the events that are taking place in the world? Because remember, the world out there is an illusion. There is no out there. All that takes place in the great all mind of God, for lack of a better expression. And everything that we perceive happening out there is actually taking place in the internal worlds. In this particular case, in the infernal worlds. That is the domain of war. That is the domain of suffering. That is the wilderness that we have been banished to as a fallen humanity, as was described in Genesis. We were banished from the Garden of Eden, which are the supernal worlds, namely the fourth dimension. We were banished into only perceiving this materium, this third dimensional reality. But in a very real way, this wilderness is the first level of hell. It is domain of suffering. And we all know that by our own experience, we know that. Now, it's not without its joys, it's not without pleasure, it's not without um, its upsides, if you will. But those pleasures that are truly bound to the materium, to the third dimension, third dimensional reality, are fleeting, they're impermanent. And so we are always on the pendulum of pleasure and pain here in the materium. And that is a kind of hell. That is the hamster wheel. That is the wheel of samsara, right? The wheel of suffering. But we are here. And that is our plight, our human condition. And as events unfold and continue to unfold in the weeks and months to come, we should use any and all calamities, disasters, wars and rumors of wars, tragedies, um, chaos, destruction. All of these are opportunities for us to reflect and to put us into a frame of consciousness where we recognize in a conscious, cognizant way the impermanence of everything on this level of reality. And that includes civilization. That includes this humanity as we know it, and this global civilization, and all of the comforts and security and technological advances and everything related to that. And to be able to return to that center and be able to perceive all that is going around us as simply events unfolding on that giant wheel. If we can be in the hub instead of identified and attached and caught up on the Ferris wheel, on the merry-go-round, whipping around with incredible forces of centrifugal and centripetal forces acting on us. If we can be in the center, in the hub, in the eye of the storm, in the still point of our own consciousness, of our own being, observing all that is going on around us, and recognize it that it is going on within us, and still remaining detached and unidentified with it, then we can be in a position to comprehend what it all means, to be able to connect to the objective truth that is present within the unfolding of these events. And we can hearken back to the following lines from Matthew. Hopefully, you guys can see that. I can make it bigger, of course. I can make it like that. All right, Matthew 24. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to shew him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, well, what? Now, why? Uh, oh, and Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And he sat upon the mount, and he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes, and divers places. In divers places. In, in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Let's just take a moment now to pause and reflect on these first 9 verses of chapter 24. And the first and obvious focal point is verse 2, when Jesus says, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. One of the enigmatic aspects of studying ancient civilizations and the archaeological record is contemporary materialist historians and archaeologists have bought into an erroneous view of human evolution and the evolution of human civilization. And as a result, many civilizations and their remnants, specifically the monolithic structures that we find in the, not just monolithic, megalithic, megalithic structures that we find in Egypt and South America, but also in the greater uh, ring of fire, so-called around the Pacific Ocean. We find the very same megalithic stonework, the megalithic masonry, in which the builders used enormous stones and constructed incredible structures and foundations and walls, for example, in Peru. And also, you can find them on the island of Japan, because the Japanese built their temples and castles upon these ancient megalithic foundations. The Japanese didn't build those foundations, they found them. And we find these incredible megalithic structures throughout the ancient world, and mainstream archaeology has attributed them to various civilizations from our epoch. But in reality, these megalithic constructions are remnants that which we inherited from previous epochs of human civilization, previous high civilizations, including Lemuria and Atlantis. What destroyed those civilizations, specifically Atlantis, was, of course, the Great Flood, a global deluge, which came about because of the sinking of the Atlantean continent, which existed where the present day Atlantic Ocean is. So Atlantis is a misnomer in that most people think of Atlantis as either a city or a continent. They talk about a lost continent, but based on Plato's description of it, which was passed down to him through Solon, it's described as a city, like the size, approximate size of a city. It's not a it's There's a discrepancy, in other words, between Plato's description of Atlantis and the understanding of Atlantis as a continent, as a lost continent. And this has caused a great deal of confusion for those who have been searching for Atlantis, as it were, the sunken continent, because they're looking for the telltale signs of a circular city with circular rings, concentric rings of land masses divided by circular canals. But the mistake that they're making is very rudimentary. It's elementary. And that is that Atlantis was both the name of a continent and the name of its capital. And we have a precedent for this. The precedent for this is Rome. Rome was the capital of the Roman Empire. Those who follow the so-called Tartaria conspiracy, or the alternate history of Tartaria and the lost civilization that was lost in the so-called mud flood. Similarly, Tartaria is a name that refers to an empire, but it also refers to its capital city. Britain was the name of course, the country, and the British Empire was the name of the empire. But Rome is perhaps the best example of a capital city which also shares its name with the empire, and Rome, the Empire of Rome, stretched across Europe and into Asia and into Africa. So Atlantis was not just a continent, it was also its capital city. So when Plato describes Atlantis, he's describing the capital city, which was organized and arranged in concentric circles with canals. But when they talk about the destruction of Atlantis, they're talking about the deluge, the great flood, which swallowed Atlantis, and Atlantis was consumed by the sea. They're talking about the sinking of a continent. And when they talk about a global flood wiping out Atlantis and wiping out the Atlanteans, they're referring to the global civilization that was Atlantis. Atlantis refers to three different phenomenon: the capital city, the continent, and the humanity, the global civilization called Atlantis. Now, all these facts are lost on most, especially those who are bought into the mainstream narrative as to the unfoldment of human civilization, and mainstream archaeology's outright rejection of Atlantis as being real. They think that it's just mythology, or that it at best refers to the sea peoples, or like there's all sorts of different people have all kinds of different theories as to where Atlantis was, just like they have all kinds of theories as to where Lemuria was, because they're still locked in the mindset that there was only one continuum, there was only one evolutionary arc, historical arc, and that Atlantis and Lemuria refer to geographic locations only, because they are locked, they are trapped in the mental block that prohibits them from seeing outside of their comfort zones into the recognition of humanities and global civilizations rise and fall. And there's an ebb and flow, and that there have been several high civilizations before ours, including Atlantis, including Lemuria, including the polar race, and the Hyperboreans, etc. So why do I mention all of this? Because Atlantis was destroyed by a flood, but that flood could not wash away the megalithic foundations as laid by the Lemurians. Their megalithic stoneworks were so devised, and if you are unaware what I'm referring to, let's see if we can't. Okay, here. Let's see. Open. No, that's not particularly. So it's these interlocking these giant megalithic blocks that are so tightly fit together that you can't fit a sheet of paper between them. And there's no mortar here. There's no mortar being used. And this masonry dates back to Lemuria, this style of masonry. And it's echoed, by the way, you can see something very similar when you look at corn on the cob, and how the corn kernels fit together. To this day, they don't know, or at least archaeologists don't know how Don't know how they could fit these blocks. Number one, how they cut them, let alone how they move them and how they position them to fit so precisely. Like each block, some of these blocks are 50 or 100 tons, and they're cut so precisely and they fit so precisely. There's all sorts of theories as to how they did this, but according to mainstream archaeology, they only had like simple stone tools. Did, did they say that the Peruvians did they say they had bronze? The Egyptians had bronze tools. I'm not sure if the historians attribute bronze tools to the Peruvians or not. But regardless, there is something special in Matthew 24 when Jesus says, "There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." This masonry survived for 20,000 years, give or take. At least 10,000 years it survived. And Peru, being part of the Ring of Fire, right, along the coast of Chile, this part of Peru, this mountainous region, is prone to a lot of seismic activity. But this survived the Great Flood. This survived countless volcanic eruptions and countless earthquakes without any mortar. But Jesus says that even these stones will be thrown down. This is significant because of the prophecy that Master Samael relayed, which was that our humanity would be destroyed by earthquakes, but not the earthquakes that we're familiar with. Earthquakes on a scale that earthquakes on a scale capable of toppling this masonry. In other words, earthquakes that the planet hasn't seen in 10, 15, 20,000 years since these walls were erected, because there have been many earthquakes in this part of the world. Just like in Japan, this same masonry can be found at the base of Osaka Castle and other castles in Japan. And it's the same masonry. Or here. This is part of the open image in new tab. Let's see. All right, it's not the best image, but it's similar. At least it's similar enough. Like, you see the L-shaped stone here, and this is all done without mortar. You see this odd shape here? This foundation is part of the imperial palace in Japan. There are other examples. There are better examples here, but you can, again, we can see reminiscent. Now, this is probably much older than the masonry at Cusco. But considering the number of typhoons and earthquakes and other natural disasters that have befallen Japan, and these foundations without any mortar are still standing after tens of thousands of years. Um, when Jesus says, "There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down," should give us pause to reflect and meditate on just what sort of natural disaster, just what sort of earthquake could shake these megalithic blocks out of their connection with one another, because these megalithic blocks are locked together. So I don't think any of us have experienced, let alone can contemplate, the kind of movement of the earth that can shake these blocks apart. That's something to keep in mind, in the back of your mind, because at the end of these first 9 verses, um, or here it's verse 8. Jesus says, "All these are the beginning of sorrows." This is just the beginning. When Jesus speaks of the false Christs, how many will come and say, "I am the Christ," and they shall deceive many. And then there will be wars and rumors of wars. And nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. And all these are the beginning of sorrows. We have experienced some, but not nearly all of what Jesus describes in these first 8 verses. There have been famines, most notably when we were growing up in the 80s was the Ethiopian famine. And there was the musical artists held that concert, famine relief for Ethiopia, and oh gosh, that British musician who also did the AIDS Live Aid, right? That was the concert, Live Aid for Africa. Bob Geldof, and in Wembley Stadium, and there was 1,000,000 people in Wembley Stadium, and countless millions more around the world watching live. And it was the largest live event, live concert anyway, up until that point in history. And they raised, I don't know how many millions of dollars they raised, but it was Live Aid for Africa. And then we also had Bob Geldof also did that song, the "Do They Know It's Christmas?" And then the Americans did "We Are the World." And again, it was all to raise money for famine relief in Africa, namely Ethiopia. So, but we haven't. I don't recall a famine of that magnitude, or certainly receiving that level of international notoriety, moving artists to hold tremendous concerts, and write songs, and hit singles and all this kind of stuff. Like that was a unique one-off event in my lifetime. And as far as pestilence is concerned, I don't know if if you would consider the COVID um, thing that we lived through as qualifying for that. Um, but this question of wars and rumors of wars, um, wars and rumors of wars. Since the first Gulf War, and I'm talking about the Gulf War that not George Bush Jr. did in 2003 when he invaded Iraq. I'm talking about the first Gulf War when his father, George Bush Sr., liberated Kuwait because Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And so the Americans went in into Operation Desert Storm. It was a Desert Shield. I can't remember, Desert Shield or Desert Storm, one of the two. And and for the first time ever, at least in my lifetime, we were seeing infrared camera footage of and satellite footage of smart bombs hitting bunkers. And it was dubbed at that time, the media dubbed it the first fully televised war. It was on 24 hours a day on CNN and on CPAC. And they were just showing the impressive firepower of the American military. And it was on it was on TV. You could make yourself some microwave popcorn and sit on the sofa, and it was entertainment. It was infotainment. But it was entertainment. And it was a war that was like watching a video game. That was another analogy that was often cited by people at the time, that there was this distance that was put between Americans and the war that their sons and daughters were going off to fight. They were watching it on TV, but it was not but it was sanitized, right? There was they weren't showing the brutality of war. They were showing things blowing up from afar, right? Satellite footage and drone footage and high altitude surveillance cameras and far reaching, far away ranged, much like what you see on the news today surrounding the current conflict. All of that playbook can be traced all the way back to the 90s, the late 80s and early 90s. And ever since then, all these conflicts around the world, we've had this distance and all of the propaganda around it and everything else. Does that qualify? Does that fit the bill of wars and rumors of war? Because we are told about wars and we are shown wars from afar. But here, certainly in the West and in much of the world, the wars don't affect us. They don't touch us. They don't reach our soil. They don't reach our cities. But Jesus says, be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. And all these are the beginning of sorrows. It's people have been trying to decode these words, these lines, since they first heard them and since they first read them. And throughout history, people have been able to map events taking place around them onto these verses and say, oh, the end is nigh and Christ's return is imminent. Because rest assured, there have been wars and rumors of wars on a regular basis for 2,000 years since Jesus spoke these words. And there have been many false prophets. And there have been many pestilences and many famines and even earthquakes. So there's always been a kind of cottage industry around uh, apocalyptic, uh, uh, around cultivating an an apocalyptic outlook or an apocalyptic ethos, if you will. And even in our own lifetime, what was the what were they called? The Branch Davidians, right? That was another doomsday cult, right? The Branch Davidians, they all drank poison Kool-Aid because they believe that was it Jesus or whoever their savior was coming by in spaceships and was going to beam them up or whatever they were going to do. So doomsday cults and apocalyptic thinking and cultivating apocalyptic beliefs has been a cottage industry for easily for 2,000 years. I mention that because I wouldn't like for today's exploration to asking these questions to suggest that that's what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm posing the questions because in light of the events taking place, these lines, these verses of the Bible were what popped into my head. And that doesn't usually happen. So I just decided that let's take this opportunity to look at these verses and reflect and contemplate. Could we be at the forefront, at just the tip of the spear, if you will, or the tip of the iceberg? It's a possibility, but I'm not saying it's an absolute truth or anything, right? Because I don't want to start a doomsday cult around the Iran conflict. Because who knows? Maybe cooler heads will prevail. Maybe the remaining Iranian authority there will smarten up and recognize that there is more to be gained by joining the international community and by making peace politically and religiously with their neighbors than there is continuing to pursue this isolationist, radicalized uh, Islamic State, this oppressive and and the cooler heads could prevail. We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But regardless, let's continue our reading here. If I can, there we go. So all these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Uh, Many a Christian and many a Catholic who found themselves persecuted for their faith in the past 2,000 years, um, based their doomsday cults and their doomsday belief and their staunchly held belief that they lived in the end times based on this verse, that that you would be outcast and despised and hated for his name's sake, being the Christ. For you would be hated for being a Christian, or you'd be hated for being a Catholic, or to what degree does that hold true today? Because we live in a largely secular world, at least in terms of economics and science. And I mean, practically speaking, regular people, normal people living their lives, um, we live in a very spiritual world, a very religious world. The vast majority of people on the planet align themselves with some faith of some kind. And Christianity is by no means in the minority in the world. But there are Christians being persecuted all over the world, even as we speak, particularly Christians living in predominantly Muslim states. Just food for thought. I don't think, like, it's not a obvious or fair statement to say that Christians are persecuted in the United States. The United States has a very, very strong and vibrant and healthy Christian tradition. Now, the woke culture wars have certainly put a great deal of pressure and stress and strain on the Christian faith in the United States, as the woke movement has attempted to secularize and impose its left-wing socialist, agenda, which is a secular atheist agenda. But this language is very strong and fairly specific. And at present, I don't know, it would be fair to say that ye shall be hated of all the nations for Christ's name's sake. I This has not yet come to pass. In From my perspective, maybe I'm being naive, maybe I'm being too generous, maybe I'm being too hopeful, or maybe I'm just not acknowledging the damage that wokeism has done and just how persecuted even the Christians in the United States are, because they have been ridiculed openly, publicly for years now. This has been generating some comments, so let's get to those. Yes, Benjamin Raphael says, especially now that there's AI and a lot of misinformation, wars nowadays sound more like rumors. And he says, yes, in fact, there was a recent incident in Nigeria where thousands of Christians were killed by Muslims. Here in Canada, Christian speech is considered hateful. Yeah, so again, this is um, and this is an interesting point where you focused specifically on language and Christian speak as being hateful. When they brand uh, Christian speech as hateful, the significance there cannot really be understated because, or sorry, cannot be overstated, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So when you wage a war against language, and when you brand Christian speech as hate speech, then in a sort of very real way, um, ye shall be hated of all the nations for my name's sake, because a name is also, in language, it's the word, and that word is Christ. And as we know, it's they don't stop at language, they don't stop at words. They want to penetrate into thoughts. It's the thought police of George Orwell. So again, I it's very possible that this verse is that this is unfolding before our eyes, even though it's um it's happening in a much more subtle, right, under the table kind of way than overtly, like Christians being thrown into concentration camps, or we don't have Christians being fed to the lions in the West anyway. That was happening 2,000 years ago. Um, and the Romans were doing that, and that's why the early Christians thought that Christ was coming back, because they read these words and they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, we are dying for the name of for Christ's name. Benjamin also says that yes, in fact, there was a recent incident in Nigeria in which thousands of Christians were reportedly killed by Muslim extremists. Meanwhile, here in Canada, certain expressions of Christian beliefs are sometimes characterized as hate speech. Yeah, so I mentioned that, how there are Christians being persecuted and in some cases slaughtered. Um, and again, mostly in Muslim countries. And that does happen. But we have to ask ourselves, to what degree and in what numbers? will this happen in the future? It's not something to um, look forward to relish in any way, but it is definitely on the list of signs that Jesus mentioned. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. Now, this has been taking place in the West. And this is, in many ways, a good description of the woke culture wars. Because the definition of woke are these people who are offended by everything. And more importantly, they betray one another. And you could see this just in the last week alone. Uh, the the BAFTA awards took place in the United Kingdom, and the BAFTA awards are essentially like the British Oscars. And there was a film that was being honored called I Scream, and it was a biopic about a gentleman whose last name is Davidson, who's lived his entire life with Tourette's syndrome. And he was invited to the BAFTAs to sit in the audience near the front of the stage because the movie based on his life was going to be receiving several awards. And at one point in the evening, a couple of African American actors stepped out on stage to present an award, and you could hear someone in the audience shouting out racial slurs. And this caused a tremendous uproar in the woke community. And despite every effort that was made to explain, in fact, one of the presenters later in the just a few moments after the event occurred, he came out and he explained Tourette's is a condition, causes people to say things involuntarily. They don't mean them. In fact, the nature of the condition is that you very often blurt out the very thing that you are most afraid of saying. So when two African Americans are on stage presenting, you can imagine what someone who suffers from Tourette's and has suffered from Tourette's his entire life is like, "Oh my, please don't say the N-word, please don't say the N-word, please don't say the N-word." And that, of course, is precisely what comes out involuntarily. Because Tourette's being on the spectrum, there's an entity that's hijacking, that's possessing that individual in those moments, certain faculties. And so if what's on his mind is don't say the N-word, don't say the N-word, don't say the N-word, that entity, that demon says, N-word, grabs that and out it comes and spits it out. And it's empowered by the very fear that the individual is suffering from in that moment, saying, please don't humiliate me, please don't humiliate me, please don't humiliate me. This individual who met the queen, and as he was shaking the queen's hand, blurted out, "F the queen," or "F the monarchy," something like that. To her face, to Queen Elizabeth's face. Imagine meeting the queen, and in that moment of pageantry and respect and dignity, you've been awarded an audience with the Queen of England. And as she reaches out her hand to greet you, and you blurt out, "F the monarchy." Now, the Queen was properly briefed. She understood what had taken place. She took it upon herself to understand the nature of the condition of the man who was coming to meet her, and she was briefed that it's very plausible, in fact, quite likely, that he will say something inappropriate because of the high stress nature of that encounter. It's not every day that a lowly Brit, who's a janitor, by the way, because that's the only job he's ever been able to keep, is one where he's more or less left alone, away from people, doing his own thing. And when someone like that gets to meet the queen, that's a big deal. And that puts a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety on someone with Tourette's. "Oh my god, just, please don't, you know, please don't let me make a fool out of myself, and please don't make me let me say something inappropriate." Well, he did say something inappropriate, and he said something inappropriate during the BAFTAs, and the nature of the inappropriate thing that he said, being that it was, quote, "racist" in the eyes of the woke crowd, they betrayed him. They attacked him. They took it as an opportunity to virtue signal, and they went on the offensive and attacked someone with a mental disability. And they raked him over the coals, and they skewered him in the court of public opinion, or they tried to, right? They tried to win political points. They tried to betray one of their own, right? A so-called downtrodden one, a so-called unprivileged one, right? Someone with a mental illness. But it doesn't matter. These people, they're motivated by power. They're motivated to dominate. And so this verse, and then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. This very easily could be describing the woke culture wars. And but also, the woke culture wars and the political fallout of that. And we continue here. "And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many." Many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. To me, this can describe the many, many, many false gurus from the new age in particular, but also the self-help movements. Everyone from Tony Robbins to David Bayer to, and then you have the new age ones and the ones on the internet. Um, these women, what are their names? I can never remember their names because they're made up bullshit new age names. Is it Snow? No. Anyway, they're a dime a dozen, and they're just influencers, but they have followers. Oh, and who's the other guy? The Iceman, Wim Hof. You know that Wim Hof is like a prophet? He's like a guru to his followers, and he teaches his Wim Hof method, and he has schools and retreats, and he takes people on excursions and he travels with them to the Antarctica or the Alps or whatever the Arctic Circle to go and do cold plunges in the cold water and everything else, and they follow him like a guru. Teal Swan, that's the name of the woman that came to mind. Teal Swan, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that her name has shown up in the Epstein files. But Teal Swan and many, many like her are these like it's like they're like new age gurus, but they're on the border of like only having an OnlyFans page, right? Because their spirituality oozes with this overt sexuality and this overt sensuality that is it's it's gross, it's slimy, it's skanky is what it is. And they use their sexuality to gain followers. It's part of their shtick. It's part of their their act. And so I liken all of these individuals to be false prophets. And there are bigger names and smaller names and ones like I mean there's Osho, right? I mean Osho was arrested for God's sake and his ashram was like broken up in the United States. When he was arrested, he owned something like 30 something Rolls Royces. And still to this day, he has followers and people who follow him as a prophet. When his entire community that he established in the United States was revealed to be one gigantic sex cult. That's all it was. It was all about money and power and dominance and sexual gratification. And it's been proven. It's it's not hearsay, it's not conjecture. But to the true believers, they still follow him. They still follow his teachings. They still believe that he was some great prophet and that maybe that he was being unlawfully, unrighteously persecuted. But then there's uh, Bikram, right? The guy who started the hot yoga schools. He also was arrested for being involved in sex scandals, of sexually abusing women who went to not only who attended his yoga schools as students, but women who traveled from around North America to learn to become instructors and franchisees of the Bikram hot yoga system. That part of their indoctrination into the Bikram hot yoga method involved uh, sexual acts with the founder, and that so it was another one of these Harvey Weinstein type scenarios where someone in a man in position of power and authority was using his position to gain sexual favors from women who were vying for his approval and his favors, etc. So the point is that we could spend probably the next 2 hours generating a list of individuals who have made themselves out to be such and such a guru, such and such a teacher, such and such a spiritual guide or instructor or founder of a school or author or channeler of mystic knowledge like Dolores Cannon, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And that list would just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And then next to that, we could do a separate column on an Excel spreadsheet. How many of these have been convicted in a court of law of various scandals? And included in this, by the way, in this list, we could include many Gnostic instructors, many individuals operating under the blanket term gnosis, claiming to be prophets or teachers or gurus of Gnosticism and setting up Gnostic schools or setting up communities or communes or schools under the umbrella of quote gnosis, who ended up involved in all manner of scandal, financial, sexual, political, and just spiritual, theological, philosophical. So this line, this verse 11, many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. I don't know. And since the advent of the internet, it's hard to argue that this hasn't already taken place. And now, Benjamin mentioned AI earlier, and he said now that there's AI and lots of misinformation, this is only going to get worse, this false prophet stuff, because AI is now starting to take that role. People are using AI as a counselor. And and I know someone, I personally know someone who's creating his own AI, spiritual AI agents, and he's training multiple ones to train one another to create this network of philosophically and spiritually superior AI prophets. And I know someone who's actively doing this. He tried to recruit me in the process to assist him and to participate in his goal to create this network of spiritually superior, philosophically superior AI agents. Suffice it to say, I cut off all ties with this individual when he wouldn't stop his persistence in trying to get me to go along with his scheme. So yes, many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And again, we could just go on and on and on generating lists. You might have people top of mind who there's we could talk about Alan Watts. We could talk about lots of people who promote the use of psychedelics and who claim that psychedelics are the path to enlightenment and awakening. And then there's all manner of people have all sorts of different approaches and and then, no, astrology is the way, and then this is the way, or that's the way, and they're all snake oil salesmen. They're all just selling, and like most people who have something to sell, they're selling on the basis of deception. What they're doing is they're selling themselves, but they're selling a false image of themselves. And that image is that of a prophet, but it's a false prophet, a false image of a prophet. The next verse, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. It might be worthwhile to just look at the second half of this verse. What does that mean? The love of many shall wax cold. While you think about that, let's Mutaga had this comment to say. He said, what makes these false prophets very appealing is, first, they do include universal truths in their teachings, and they also know how to flatter human egos. Yes, without a doubt, false prophets, the most dangerous teachings are those that are 70, 80, 90% correct. Those are the most dangerous teachings, and the most dangerous prophets are the ones who are the most learned, who have studied the most, and, as you point out, Mutaga, the ones who are most charismatic. It's not just flattery, although that's a big part of it, but it's not just flattery. It's this combination. It's the dark arts. It's just the right combination of carrot and stick. So it's flattery where flattery is called for, but it's also chastisement where chastisement is called for. And like a cat toying with a mouse. Carrot and stick, carrot and stick, carrot and stick. And then in between your mark, because that's how con artists refer to their victim, the person that they're exploiting and taking advantage of, the person that they're tricking and fooling, the one whose confidence they want to win and win over in order to dominate and exploit them. That's called a mark. A mark gets batted back and forth between receiving validation, love, and attention, and being made to, and flattery, and being made to feel good about themselves, and chastisement, and being made to feel inadequate, and being made to feel afraid that they're not good enough, or that somebody else is going to surpass them, or that they're going to get left behind. You know the expression FOMO, fear of missing out. And even when you think back to the film Gladiator, and the senators are describing how clever Commodus is, by his 150 days of games to honor the passing of his late father, the former emperor of Rome. One of them says, fear and wonder, a powerful combination. And that's again describing these two pillars, right? Of positive and negative, of flattery and chastisement, and getting someone bouncing back and forth between these two polarities. And you can manipulate and exploit them in any number of ways. And that's the dark arts, that's the black arts. That's that book that was written by that famed propagandist whose name is on the tip of my tongue, but Bernays, Edward Bernays. Is it Edward Bernays or Edmund Bernays? Anyway, Bernays, he wrote this book on propaganda, and it became the modus operandi. It became the textbook. It became the Bible for marketers and advertisers and influencers ever since. It's essentially like the book essentially is like how to sell anything to anybody, whether they want it or not, right? Um, so false prophets operate in that milieu. That is their false prophets are black magicians. And the more learned they are, the more studied they are, the more powerful a black magician they become, because they have so much more of the truth in their arsenal to just twist and corrupt and use to manipulate their marks. But coming back to verse 12, the love of many shall wax cold. For me, this is an apt description of the closed, cold-hearted nature of certainly life in the West. This kind of general malaise, and that the word that I'm looking for is indifference. It's the Jerry Seinfeld attitude. Do you remember Seinfeld? Remember how it was a show about nothing, and the characters on the show had a kind of like cynical, satirical, it kind of indifference to everyone and everything. If it wasn't about them, they didn't care. This is, to me, this is what the love of many shall wax cold. Wax, when it's cold, it's frozen. It doesn't flow. You think about cold wax is what they used to do in the days that the King James Bible was written. Wax was used to seal bottles of wine, but also used to seal letters, right? And seal important documents, right? The wax seal, you would drop hot wax onto the paper, and then you would take your seal and you would press it into the wax and you would let it cool, and then it would harden, and it would be impossible to read that letter without breaking the seal, right? Breaking open the wax. So this wax cold is like that cold-heartedness, that hard-heartedness, that's indifference. That's your heart is sealed off, just like the characters on Seinfeld. But why are they that way? Well, they're that way because of the first part of the sentence. Because iniquity shall abound. Well, what's iniquity? Iniquity really is an archaic term these days. We talk about equity and equality. Well, iniquity is like the opposite of that. Iniquity is sin. Iniquity is exploitation. Iniquity is when someone is benefiting at the expense of others, right? That's iniquity. Equity or equality is the mutually beneficial exchange of energy. right? So an equal exchange is equality or equity, an equitable exchange, an equitable transaction, if you will. So a commercial transaction, you give money to a vendor, and that vendor provides you with a good or a service of equal or greater value, and you deemed to have made a good deal, right? An equitable deal. Iniquity is the opposite of that. Iniquity is somebody taking advantage of you or you taking advantage of somebody else. And let's face it, without question, I don't even think this is up for debate. We live in a world in which iniquity abounds. I don't think this is up for debate. And I'm not talking like from the perspective of the wokies who want everything to be they want equity in everything. They want equity of outcomes. I'm not talking about that iniquity. I'm just talking about the iniquity of the few exploiting the many, and how entities, these mechanical entities we call corporations, and all of the capitalist engine and the public corporation, its duty is to its shareholders, and how that fiduciary duty runs contrary to the natural balance of mutually advantageous exchange of energy, like that you find in ecosystems. In ecosystems, there's very little iniquity. There's very little exploitation in an ecosystem. But in our civilization, there's a great deal of exploitation. There's a great deal of iniquity. And because of that, well, you sort of, can you really blame those many whose love waxes cold, who turtle, who pull themselves in and defend themselves against that iniquity? They become cynical. We become cold-hearted. We close ourselves off to the world because everyone and everything out there is trying to take advantage of us. And those of us who do have a great deal of love to give, and we're very giving, and we've gone through lives where we've bent over backwards to help others and give to others and so on. And so many of us have been trodden on, used and abused and taken advantage of so many times that maybe we ourselves have found ourselves in this position with our love waxing cold, where we've shored up our defenses and we've tucked our heart away under layers of armor, because we just got sick and tired of having our heart broken, or being trampled on, or being exploited, being taken advantage of. Our kindness and our compassion and our generosity, and it's even in the Bible, elsewhere in the Bible, where it says, you know, do not cast pearls before swine. If the pearls that we have to give is our love, well, you know, you this number 12 is one of these where it's hard. It would be hard to argue that doesn't accurately describe the world today. By the way, Mutaga says the name was Edward Bernays, a nephew of Sigmund Freud. And yes, you're absolutely right. I couldn't remember if it was Edmund or Edward, but yes, Bernays. And yes, you're absolutely correct. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And in fact, he used Freud's research and analysis and his books, and he used Freud's insights into human psychology as the basis, as the foundation for his book on propaganda and convincing people, convincing anyone of anything. And Freud was horrified. He was incensed that his work, his life's work, which he had devoted himself to try to help humanity understand its suffering and understand psychology. He was mortified that his own blood, his own nephew, would take that work and twist it and corrupt it into this basically a textbook on the dark arts. Mutaga also says in an ecosystem, they have a more symbiotic relationship. In our system, we have a more parasitic relationship, or vampiric relationship, host or vampire. Yeah, that's certainly true. And when you think of vampires or zombies and all of these monsters, they're undead, right? And they're like hell spawn. And when you think of parasites or parasitic relationships, we talk about egos, right? We talk about demons, we talk about demonic possession. So egos are that. But as we've also discussed in the past and we've explored extensively, egos are mechanical. And a machine just needs energy to run, and its algorithm, it's run, it's heartless and it's soulless. But a machine will keep running and will keep using whatever power source is there until it runs out of power. So in that sense, it's also very parasitic, just like a parasite, like a tick or whatever, just digs itself in and it sucks your blood. Or a virus. I mean, a virus, it's hard to argue a virus is anything but mechanical. So, but you're right, there's an absence of the mutual symbiosis or the mutual beneficial symbiosis. It's but there's lots of, in a parasitic relation, there's lots of even codependencies, right? People exploiting one another. Benjamin says, it feels harder than ever to speak honestly these days because people don't always want to hear things that challenge them. They very rarely want to hear things that challenge them. There's a clear preference for constant entertainment over deeper conversation or reflection. Absolutely. That may be one reason why genuine care and commitment don't seem as strong as they once were. Well, yeah, because one of the hallmarks of iniquity is indifference, right? Like I was describing the parasite or the mechanicity, like a corporation doesn't care about you. They just don't. A corporation cannot care about you. It's incapable of it. It doesn't have a mechanism. There is no mechanism in a corporation that cares. There is no department of caring. There is no vice president of care. There isn't. Even the human resources department, listen to that title. Human resources. Human resources. That describes the extent and the limits to which a corporation cares about its employees. They are human and they are resources. That's it. It's a corporation is a machine. So naturally, it's indifferent to human beings and the human condition. It's indifferent. It doesn't care. What does a corporation care about? Its fiduciary duty. It cares about what its shareholders and what its board of directors care about. What the shareholders and what the board of directors tell the corporation it needs to care about. The corporation cares about its fiduciary duty, which is to its owners, its shareholders. And everything else serves that purpose. That's why the departments related to customers are called marketing. Now, you might argue, but companies have something called customer service. And so lots of companies have a department called customer care. No, there isn't a single corporation. I challenge anybody to find me a single corporation, and I mean like publicly traded or that otherwise we can gain access to their financial statements, so that issue publicly issued financial statements in which a senior member of the so-called C-suite, the executive team of the corporation, has a title like VP customer service, and that they sit in on the same meetings with the CEO, the CFO, the VP of sales, the VP of marketing, et cetera, the VP of technology, et cetera. You will not find somebody in those meetings called VP customer service who has the same compensation level and has the same voice, has the same say in the decision-making processes and the strategic direction of the corporation. Customer service is way down the totem pole past human resources. Customer service is a cost center. It is an aspect of the corporation that it begrudgingly pays lip service to, which is why North American companies, their so-called customer service, has all been farmed out to call centers run out of India. That's how precious and important customer service is to the corporations. They outsource it. They outsource it to people who can at sometimes barely speak English. That's why when you call a corporation here for help, you end up speaking to somebody in India and they say, oh, well, I actually can't really help you. I got to forward it to a supervisor or whatever, and so on and so forth. It's a hassle for corporations that they have to do customer service. They would prefer not to do customer service. And many of them now are turning to AI and AI chatbots to be the first line of defense in their so-called customer service or customer care. The only reason why car companies, they have a so-called service department, but that service department is not customer service. It's servicing the automobile. It's aftermarket service. It's a profit center. It's there to make their retail franchisees money, because that service comes with a price tag. right? Even while under warranty. I mean, like oil changes and that kind of stuff, right? All car dealerships have a service department because that's where they make most of their money. So again, with so little out there designed and constructed to care for you, the natural tendency is to hide away and protect that which is deserving of such care, but it's not getting it. It's getting the opposite. So so what do? You seal it up. You wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. This is obviously the first of many positive verses to come. But the implication here is, but have patience, have resilience, have grit. Because if you can endure all of this, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. I think it's fair to say that the gospel has reached all four corners of the world. And to what degree is it top of mind? Well, maybe not yet, but maybe soon. We'll see. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Now, at this time, we could go on a tangent and could go and look up Daniel and see what he said about standing in the holy place, et cetera, et cetera. But that would take too much time. So I encourage you to go and do that on your own, if that's something you wish to do. But when ye see the abomination of desolation, stand in the holy place. Desolation of destruction of death. This is a very Christic symbol. This is the phoenix. This is used when I was describing earlier the spinning merry-go-round. But if you stand in the center of that wheel, instead of on the fringes, instead of on the edges, where you're all caught up in the storm, you go to the center, to the eye of the storm, to the holy place. There's only one holy place, right? That's your connection to the kingdom. That's your connection to Christ. That's your own innermost being. And if everything around you, including your own mind and your own physical body, has become an abomination of desolation, stand in the holy place. Stand in the center of your being, in the Adam nous of the heart, or in the pineal gland, the third eye, in the holy seat of the innermost being of the and the divine consciousness. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your fight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Benjamin might be able to qualify this or confirm this for me. I have a feeling that these lines are taken from Daniel. So when Jesus says, the abomination spoken of Daniel by the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth him, whoso readeth, let him understand that these lines actually Jesus is quoting Daniel, but Benjamin can confirm that or not. And he says the abomination of desolation refers to an idolatrous act that desecrates what is sacred, disrupting true worship and ushering in severe judgment. In my view, the temple can also be understood symbolically as the human body, set apart for God. From that perspective, the profanation occurs when what was meant to be sanctified is abandoned and replaced with idolatrous pursuits. To me, Benjamin, the the line um, desolation, abomination, of course, is as you describe it. An abomination is a twisting and a corrupting of something. But desolation is the cleansing. Desolation is like the desolate desert. It's like it's what's left after a conflagration. So either a great flood or a great fire. So what the following lines say is that in those days, let him who's on a housetop. Now, who's on a housetop? Right? And who's on a housetop? You're on the roof of your house because of the flood. Let him not come down to take anything out of his house. His house has to be destroyed. And this also, what is the housetop of the temple? It's in the crown chakra. It's in the pineal gland. It's in the top. Let him not come down to try to save anything in the house, which is the body. The body's going to die. Yeah, exactly. The housetop sometimes refers to a higher consciousness. Let him who is in the top of the house, in his higher consciousness, let him not come down to identify and attach and try to take it with him. You know that expression, you can't take it with you. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes, right? So this is all about non-attachment and non-identification, to the point where, again, I believe these come directly out of Daniel. And woe unto them who are with child, and to them who are basically suckling their newborns in those days, because there's no future for the spawn of this humanity. There's no future for terrestrial children. It's only the children of heaven. It's only the children of Christ, the children of Israel, the children of Isis, Ra, Elohim. For there shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world. Because the next line says, and except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. What he's saying here is that for the sake of those who have earned their right to become seeds for the next humanity, those who have been saved, the days of suffering for them will be shortened. There will be a reprieve. They will not have to endure the full extent of the suffering. But that this is a metaphysical salvation, that there's no flesh to be saved. We must abandon that. Then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. So again, we're coming back to false prophets again. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. How many phenomena do we experience these days that profess um, to offer us salvation, or to profess to offer us the answers, or that profess to be the be all and the end all? And Master Samael talked about the Antichrist being materialist science. And certainly, materialist science is one of those phenomena. Um, but then we can also talk about the same false prophets that we talked about before, but like the self-help gurus, the people teaching the manifesting your desires stuff, and abundance, and to what degree various Christian sects who uh, really engage in idolatry and worship of Jesus the man, To what degree they fall into this, I don't know. But Jesus continues, he says, "For wheresoever the carcass is, there will be the eagles." Sorry. "For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." When they say eagles here, I mean, they're talking eagles, but you can also imagine vultures. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." So here they're talking about what Christians describe as the rapture. Benjamin Raphael says, "Oh wait." Benjamin says that passage reflects an old passage saying from the Gospel of Thomas, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you and outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, you will live in poverty, and you." The second half of that got cut off, Benjamin, if there was another half of that. And Benjamin, oh, and you are that poverty. Okay. And Benjamin also says that the eagles is a symbol of the Roman Empire and the USA of today. Well, that's true. So that relates here to wherever the carcass is, there will be eagles gathered together. But Benjamin was what he was saying earlier here is, if they say to you, 'Behold, the Christ is here, go not forth. If he's a secret chambers, believe it not.'" And Benjamin's saying that this refers to this passage from Thomas, which says that the Christ really is inside of you. So anybody who tells you that Christ is here or Christ is there, salvation is outside of you. Really, the salvation is inside of you. But I mean, Thomas also said that the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. I mean, that's elsewhere. But again, this is all downplayed nowadays. Um, how far? Oh, okay, we're not too come. Verse 32. "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So the parable of the fig tree. It's being able to read the signs and knowing the signs and recognizing that we are in the end times. The end is nigh. The end is near. And that's really sort of what today has been about as well, and what a lot of what Atlas information is about, and why I often use this background, right, for live streams on this topic, because it's hard to look at an image like this. It's hard to see, like, when we talk about when we do step by step, line by line through this particular chapter, and we see so many congruencies, so many things lining up. It's, it it's hard to ignore the signs. But again, I I remind you that people have been finding the signs for 2000 years. I mean, the early Christians were going through hell in the Roman Empire, being persecuted by the Romans and everything else, and so we can always there's been iniquity in the world all that time. There have been wars and rumors of wars. There have been pestilences, there have been famines, there have been suffering, there's been iniquity. So, and there have been people closing up their hearts, and so people have been reading these passages and believing that the end is nigh for nigh 2000 years. Mutaga says one big issue with modern Christians, they read literally texts that were meant to be layered and allegorical. Ancient rarely, if ever, wrote stories to be taken literally. That's that's true. And he says, many are in a delusion of thinking a man will appear in the sky and save us, but we have had countless teachers' guides, but they get rejected. Yeah, so this is Jesus is not talking about, he's talking about the return of the Christ. Christ is not a man. Christ is the Son of Man. Christ is born of man, but he's not a man. This is this is the mystery. And like Mutaga points out, if you only understand things literally, then you get caught up in the delusion that there's going to be a guy and he's going to be calling himself Jesus, and that he's going to return, and that's what a lot of Christians are waiting for. But that's not how the Son of Man will return unto this humanity and usher in the end of this humanity. Benjamin says, I understand the parable of the fig tree as a picture of humanity failing to bear fruit. Instead of producing what is life giving, it appears to be withering, ref- reflecting what I see as the current condition of mankind. In that sense, it points to the consequences of neglect and judgment, much like when Jesus cursed the fig tree after it had been given time to produce fruit, but did not. Yeah, and I think that's a fair reading, Benjamin. However, um, the the parable here, um, is fairly straightforward. He's He's talking about a new sprouting branch on a fig tree that is tender, it's young, and it's putting forth leaves. You know that summer is nigh. So it's not, it's new leaves sprouting on a tree. This particular parable of the fig tree doesn't relate to fruit. Although I hear you, I hear where you're coming from, where another parable of the fig tree talks about had the opportunity to bear fruit, but it didn't. But a branch that is just sprouting leaves in summer and that in spring, because this is still springtime. There's no fruit in springtime. The fig tree is just sprouting fresh leaves. Well, when it's fresh leaves are coming on that tender branch, you know that summer is nigh. And summer is just around the corner. Fruit is late summer, fall, autumn. So this is not a necessarily related to that particular passage. I think instead it's just being used as a parable, an allegory of what appears. And that, look, if you look at the fig tree and you see new leaves sprouting on tender branches, on newly sprouted branches, then you know summer is around the corner. You know you're in spring, in other words. And it's interesting that he is using spring and an allegory, an analogy of the fig tree in spring to describe what, for all intents and purposes, should be what you're describing. Because surely the twilight of a civilization, the Kali Yuga, the end times of a humanity, surely that's autumn, is it not? Yeah, Benjamin says, "Apologies, no need to apologize, um, for the confusion. That passage is guiding us on how to discern the signs so that when we see them unfolding, we can recognize the season we're in." Yeah, exactly, but your earlier comment still holds, because why would Jesus use an analogy of the fig tree in spring to describe what you are pointing out, the fig tree bearing fruit that needs to be harvested, right, in the fall, at the end of the season? And surely we are at the end of the season, are we not? But are we? Where was it? Verse 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Jesus is talking about the beginning of the end, and all of the signs are about the beginning of the end. And surely the beginning of the end of the season must be springtime. when the branch is tender, putting forth leaves. If we think about it in our experiential way, we know that the trees and the plants that bear fruit in the late summer and in the fall and are harvested, they flower in the spring and in the summer. The fruit that we harvest in the fall has its beginning in the spring and in the summer. That's what Jesus is talking about, the beginning of the end times. He says, "So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But of that day and hour no man, no, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall." Oh, anyway. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, there were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But, and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In this passage, Jesus describes what it takes to be an elect. And he's describing two types of servant. A faithful and wise servant who is watchful, who knows that who knows what season it is, that it is the season of the Lord, and that he is watchful and there's this line, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season. And blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find doing so. To give them meat in due season. Meat is not necessarily literally meat here, but it's like the fruits of labor. But clearly it's food, it's sustenance, but it can be spiritual sustenance. Meat is when you give of your flesh. It's sacrifice. And the servant who serves and sacrifices for others and gives unto them in accordance with the season. And the Lord hath made ruler over his household. Well, to be a ruler of the household is to rule over the occupants of the house, i.e., children, and to give them meat in due season, to give the children of God that which they require in accordance with the season, with what season it is. It comes back to birth, death, and sacrifice, the path of the bodhisattva, the path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity, selflessness. It is that servant that is blessed. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing, shall find giving them meat, these occupants of the household, these children of God, giving them the meat in due season, in according to the season. They're feeding them the sustenance, the gnosis. Verily I say unto you that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. Because anyone who fulfills that role of that servant, taking care of the household, providing them the meat in due season in accordance with the needs of in accordance with the times that we're living in, that individual can only do so if they are living from that place of selflessness within them. All of God's goods flow through us into the world. That is the meat. That is the sustenance. It is the truth. It is the gnosis. It is the light. I'm the light of the world. And Christ, you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood. It's the unction. It's the mystery. It's the partaking in the body and blood of God. is the body and blood of Christ. This is what is good. All his goods, all that Christ had to give is what he gave in sacrificing, in his sacrifice. So the servant who follows that example, and Christ said, if anyone would be with me, let him pick up his cross and follow me. But Jesus says, and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. Nah, it's not the end times. Nah. It's Christ is not coming back. It's all hogwash, whatever. And he shall begin to smite his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunken. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Those who would be masters of the house, but attack the good servants, the righteous servants, their fellow servants, but attack them. And instead, they eat and drink with the drunken, with those who are drunk on pleasure and those who are drunk on power or drunk on iniquity. We're drunk on sin, on ego, on all the identifications and attachments of the world. For them, the end of the world will come in an hour that they're not aware of because they're not aware. And God will cut them asunder and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. Hypocrites are the ones who, of course, proclaim to be gods on earth. They act like they rule the world. They act like they rule over humanity with impunity. They act as if they're the gods of their own destiny, and there is no God. Well, they're hypocrites. And then theirs shall be the great weeping and gnashing of teeth, that this infamous line from the Bible, the gnashing of teeth, the wailing and gnashing of teeth, because that they will have the utmost in suffering. The ones who are identified and attached to physical reality, to their pleasures, and they're drunk on lust, they're drunk on sensation, they're drunk on entertainments. Yeah. They're the hypocrites because they believe themselves to be masters and gods of their reality, lords over creation. Theirs will be the truly rude awakening, and for them will be tremendous suffering. Well, suffice it to say, I for one wanted to share this with you today, just inspired to do so because of war and rumors of war. And is this a sign? Because remember, there's also the war in Ukraine. There was also that action that the American military took down in Venezuela. There is strife happening in Cuba, and there may be more on the horizon. I just was instructed to go through this verse and share this verse, and if nothing else, ask questions just to show what's in the what was said in this particular verse from Matthew, and to just contemplate, where are we, and remind you of to spend some time with yourself and in prayer and meditation with your own higher self, and ask, am I this goodman of the house? Am I this wise and faithful servant? Am I this faithful and wise servant whom his Lord hath made ruler over the household to give them meat in due season? Surely, surely we're on. Do you guys not see that? Oh, anyway. Might be a waste of time. Anyway. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we wrap it up today? As I mentioned, I was ill last week. I apologize for having to cancel last week's live stream, but I really was quite sick, and not only with flu, like cold congestion, but I had a terrible sore throat, and it was really quite bad. And my tongue, the back of my tongue, was covered in sores, like canker sores and stuff, all in my mouth. It was dreadful. It was painful. It was dreadful. It was very unpleasant, and I certainly didn't think it prudent to subject anybody to that, and and I would not have been able to offer anything of any value anyway. So, oh, Benjamin says, sorry to hear about that. Glad you're feeling better now. Well, thank you, Benjamin. Yes, I'm feeling much better. And it's still not 100%, but way, 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 way much better than what I was at this time last week. So, yes, thank you for that. I hope you guys found today beneficial to one degree or another. Um, it's it's just something different than what we usually do. Benjamin says, "Thank you for such a timely reflection on those verses. They were both inspiring and instructive. You shared your thoughts in a way that really captured the heart of the scripture, and that meant a lot. I truly appreciate you continuing to share your work. May you be encouraged as you keep serving in the Lord's work." Well, thank you for those kind words, Benjamin. And by the way, um, I made it a point not to read this chapter beforehand. I went into this cold today with all of you. The only thing that I had was the couple verses around wars and rumors of wars. But the rest of it, I said, let's discover it together. So, because as you know, there are things that I need to prepare to one degree or another, but it's it's beneficial to me also to have to rely on my intuition and inspiration, and in the moment what the scripture is revealing to me in the moment, so that we can share it in that together, so we can participate in that together. um, Mugaboo says, or sorry, Mutaga says, appreciate the preaching as always. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for being here, Mutaga. Thank you for your contributions, and to everybody who made comments and filled in the blanks here, because it was a good discussion, and there was a lot to discuss. This is a very, very powerful and pregnant passage from the Bible, this chapter, and but that can be said for so many and so many chapters and so much of the Bible, and why they have Bible study, and why in all religions, certainly Christian religions, there's Bible study, and how people study the Bible for years and decades in their entire lifetimes. Right? You can just keep unpacking it and unpacking it and unpacking it, because it's that type of it's not conventional discourse. It's not just communication, or it's not information. It is objective truth that is bound within a codex that can be unfurled and unpacked, much like Pandora's box, or just like unfolded, just like an acorn sprouts and becomes an oak tree. So the dilemma, the challenge, is that many people attempt to do so, and attempt to do their Bible study with their intellect alone. And we have to go deeper. We have to go into our experience. We have to go into our intuition. We have to draw upon the source that from which these words, the scripture, sprang forth to begin with. And especially when we're talking about, the words of Jesus, we're talking about the Christ speaking. And so, as you were pointing out, some of you, how it's not to be taken just literally. We have to comprehend on those deeper levels. Benjamin says, unfold it, unfurl it, or unfold it like a scroll. Yeah, that's another way to look at it. Sure, where you just and then and not at all ironically, we know that certainly the Old Testament books, that's precisely how they were written. That the Torah and Talmud are on these enormous scrolls, and how you go from one chapter to another by rolling up one side and unrolling the other side. They're phenomenal objects, phenomenal artifacts, those ancient scrolls. So yeah, for certain, for sure. All right, everyone. I want to thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with me again. Keep an eye on the news, keep an eye on the unfolding events, remain aware, and it doesn't, again, today's the goal of today was not to indoctrinate you into some sort of doomsday cult. That's not what this passage is about. But at the same time, to remain cognizant and aware and awake and observant of the signs around us, to know what season we are in, and to be the wise servant, and to give those in the household the meat that is due them, that is due in this season. So if we are in the end times and the return of the Christ is nigh, which means it's pending, it's coming, it's around the corner, just over the horizon, whatever you want to, however you want to think about it. What is my role as a servant of God, as a servant of my innermost? And what is the meat that I am here to serve unto the children of God in these times? What is my contribution? What is it that I have of myself to give, that God will make me the ruler of his goods? He will put me in charge of delivering his goods. Like any delivery man, like any tugboat, is given the responsibility of bringing that super tanker into port. Any delivery man, it rules over those goods that he has been charged with delivering. Who am I, and what are the goods that I am here to rule over and serve? Only you can know that. That's between you and your innermost. It's between you and your innermost essence of God, your own innermost intimate Christ. And in light of this, in light of where we ended up today, and where this passage ends up, and what Jesus is telling us to do, and how he's clearly specks out the difference between the wheat and the chaff, the one who remains in the field and the one who's saved. At the beginning, he said, let your heart be not troubled, for all this must come to pass. Now you can begin to appreciate and understand why all this must come to pass. Because here it was just a war, or a rumor of war, that inspired me to take you all on this journey, on this sojourn into verse 24 today, and to get you to where you are right now, looking at yourself and questioning and contemplating how you can be that wise and faithful servant. That's what all these signs are about. They're arrow signs, but they're all pointing toward you, toward that place, that holy place, the sacred place that Daniel wrote about, to the seat of the ruler of your temple, to the Lord and Master of the house of the Lord within you. And are you going to serve your Lord and Master? And if you are that faithful and wise servant, you will be made a ruler of all of God's goods. And you will not partake in the weeping and gnashing of teeth, like the foolish servants who say, this end times, apocalypse, blah, 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 this and that and the other thing, who go off to get drunk and indulge. drunk on lust, drunk on pleasure, drunk on materialism, drunk on power, drunk on mechanicity, drunk on entertainment. While we read the horizon, we read the writing on the wall, we see the signs, we know the season, and we say, I am a servant of the Lord. I am here to serve unto the hungry the meat that is their due in this season. So that, I hope, is a hopeful takeaway for all of us from this otherwise, you know, unpleasant news of war and rumors of war. And let us take that positive takeaway in our hearts as we move forward, and regardless of what the news uh, pumps out over the next days and weeks and months, because as I've mentioned in the past, things will be getting worse. There will be more signs, but let your hearts, let not your hearts be troubled. Let not your hearts be troubled. For all these things must come to pass. Thank you all again. Um, I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week, and take care. And as always, inferential peace. Goodbye, everybody.